This video is for all of the guys who have already lost 5, 10, 15, 20 kilos or more, but you've still got about 5 to 10 pounds, 3 to 5 kilos of body fat left to lose. Probably around the midsection, hiding the abs that you want to get off. That was exactly where Henry was before I helped him take off the final 5 to 10 pounds. Here's exactly how we did that. So what's worked to get you to where you are is the thing you need to be continuing to get to where you want to be, but there's going to be some things we need to fine tune along the way, because essentially if you've lost any weight, you have been in a calorie deficit, and we need to continue that calorie deficit. But as you get leaner and leaner, a lot of the smaller variables related to training, nutrition, recovery become that little bit more important. So Henry had dropped from 89 to 79 kilos on his own, and that was the point where he started with me to really bring the result home, make sure he didn't lose any muscle along the way. We've since dropped 5 kilos to reveal a pretty phenomenal physique transformation, if I do say so. And I think he's probably built a little bit of muscle in this process as well. We're also going to continue onwards from here. Henry wants to drop another couple of kilos before we start the lean gain. Personally, I think for most guys, you could get to here and then lean gain up from there, no trouble whatsoever. For those who don't know me, my name's Vaughan. I'm a professional natural bodybuilder. I am essentially just teaching you everything I've learned in my own natural bodybuilding pursuits to build as much muscle as possible and get as lean as humanly, physically possible. And I also run Team Locked In coaching. So the first thing is with your diet, your food choices, because it is mostly about the calorie deficit. What you're going to find is you need to tighten things up. The deeper and deeper you get into this, the leaner and leaner you get. So at the start, right, if you were 20 kilos overweight and you've gone and dropped 10 to 15 already, you really could have gotten away with like a 60-40 approach. 60% quote unquote clean foods, 40% soul foods, for example. 60% whole food, 40% soul food. That's a good way to put it, because you were doing just enough to nudge you into the calorie deficit. And then over time, you've noticed that if you eat too much low nutrition food, so whether that's highly processed food, fast food, junk food, so to speak, then you're starving. And it's way too easy to go over your calories. So you need to be really willing to tighten up, right? 60-40 to 80-20, and even 80-20 to 90-10. And even for me, right, if I'm going to be taking it all away, it's pretty close to 100% clean. Now, you don't need to do that. There's still room for an untracked meal here and there, an off-plan meal here and there, absolutely, especially if you're going to do it the night before leg day, so you can really put the calories to good use. But 90-10 is about where you want it to be for your weekly calories. We'll talk through that approach, but here's what you're going to find. You're not going to like what I'm going to say. So the first thing you need to really optimize where possible is your sleep, because we have direct data which shows if you're in a calorie deficit and you sleep 5.5 hours per night instead of 8.5 hours per night, the amount of body fat you lose of the weight will be 50% less, and the amount of muscle you will lose will be 50% more. Let me repeat that back to you. You will lose 50% more muscle, and you will lose 50% less body fat by sleeping 5.5 hours per night instead of 8.5 hours per night. Now, I ain't sleeping 8.5 hours per night. I would love to, but that's not me. I'm not doing that. I'm just telling you, do the very best you can. This is something you are probably overlooking. Do not overlook it. Do what you can to get as much sleep as you possibly can. It is that important. It is that important. Like I said, I'm not getting 8 hours per night. To be honest, Henry, probably averaging maybe 7, maybe just under 7, if I'm being honest with you. But we do want to make it a priority because of all of the transformations I've created for guys who have gotten, like really pretty lean, like I'm talking full 6-pack, 8-pack lines everywhere. None of these guys have terrible sleeping habits. None of these guys are sleeping 4 or 5 hours per night. All of these guys have good enough sleeping habits where they're getting at least 6.5 hours every night, 7 on average, and then maybe on the weekends you might get the odd 8 here and there, which brings your average up to sort of 7.5, so to speak. So that is sleep. Now let's talk through training. So when you're thinking about your program, which you should be following a training program. So if you're not, that's step number 1, and you can just get one off Chat GPT. I'll teach you a few things you want to put into that program, but ChatGPT will make you a completely adequate training program. You're managing frequency, intensity, and volume. Think about it like this. The more frequently you train a muscle, let's say you were going to train your legs every single day. All right, well, can you do 10 sets with a super high intensity? So all the way to all out failure? Probably not, right? Not every single day. You could do 10 sets every day, but they're not going to be very intense, are they? You're not going to be like psychologically 100% there for every single one of those sets. So there's always a trade-off. The more frequently we train a muscle, we have to sacrifice either some volume or some intensity. The more intensely we train a muscle. So if we push every single set all the way to failure, which is not a bad way of training. It's a very safe way of training in the sense that you never have to worry whether you're pushing hard enough. Well, we either need to be training with not super high volumes or not super frequently. Here's what I recommend, and I'm going to preface this by saying, as you get deeper and deeper into your cut, as your body weight comes down, as your body fat percentage comes down, you will want to be moving towards more machines, because machines have external stability. As you get lighter, as you get leaner, your body's ability to produce internal stability will be reduced. This is why bodybuilders in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks before their show, you don't see them maxing out on squats, maxing out on deadlifts, maxing out on barbell bench. They're focusing primarily on machines. It does not mean you have to go light. I'm not saying go lightweight, higher reps. Still do the rep ranges which you enjoy for that particular exercise, but now switch over to more and more machines so that you can safely and reliably push close to failure, if not all the way to failure, without having to worry about your balance, your ability to stabilize being the limiting factor. Why is this important? Like, we're just trying to lose some weight, right? Because you need to make sure the weight that comes off from this point onwards is body fat, not muscle. So you need to do everything you can to hold on to as much muscle as possible, and that's why we need to be training in an externally stabilized manner, and that means lots of machine work. Here's another thing I recommend. I recommend keeping your intensity high, and if you're going to sacrifice either intensity, volume, or frequency, the thing you sacrifice is volume. So let me define this for you. I should have done it. Volume means the number of sets you do for a muscle, either per workout or most people say per week. Frequency means how often you train a muscle per week. Intensity means how close you push towards failure. Now, if you're already doing 3 to 4 sets per exercise twice a week, that's a great program. Whether you're on a push-pull legs or an upper body, lower body, something like that, that's a phenomenal program. As you get leaner and leaner and leaner, I would be directing you more towards doing closer to 2 sets, maybe 2 to 3 sets per exercise rather than 3 to 4, and doing that 2 to 3 times per week rather than 2 times per week, because your ability to accumulate stimulus in a given workout will be lower given you are now a much lighter and smaller individual. And so I recommend training those muscles more frequently to make up for that lack of ability to essentially push as hard as you could in a bulk. Psychologically, you're still pushing as hard as you can, but are you really putting as much tension on the muscle? Are you really doing that? Now let's get into nutrition. Now, you've been in a calorie deficit that's got you to where you are. Let's say you're now down to 2,000 calories, and that's what's working for you to lose weight, and you need 180 grams of protein, for example, right? Like, let's say this was Henry's calorie and protein at the start when he came to me. Here's how I would tighten this up. First off, we would move to a macro tracking approach, so tracking the protein, the carbs, and the fats. We would be potentially increasing the protein a little bit, and we would be keeping carbs high and fats low. I'm going to teach you exactly where your carbs, fats, and protein should be based on your body weight, but I want to tell you why we do high carb, low fat dieting to get the really lean, hard look that you want, essentially. This is a paper from a guy called Andrew Chappell. He is a natural bodybuilding judge, and he also authored a paper on natural bodybuilding called The Nutritional Strategies of High-Level Natural Bodybuilders During Competition Prep. Natural bodybuilders are the people you should be looking towards, because these are the people who routinely
get as lean as humanly possible whilst keeping all of their muscle. You may not care at all about getting up on stage in a G-string. That's completely fine, but you should be looking at what these people are doing, and you know you can apply this potentially without the same extreme level of consistency and intensity. You can get away with a little bit more, for example, than someone in a contest prep. But you want the same result. You want to get as lean as possible whilst keeping all of your muscle. That's what you want. So what they found was nutrient intake of bodybuilders reflected a high protein, high carb, low fat diet. This is what the bodybuilders are doing. This is how they're getting that really lean look whilst keeping their muscles as full as possible. They also found that the males who placed higher in the competition had a greater carbohydrate intake at the start of their contest prep. That's very interesting. So not only are most bodybuilders going high protein, high carb, low fat, but the ones who place the highest have the highest amount of carbs. Something very, very interesting there, isn't it? So that's what they are sort of concluded, that greater carbohydrate intake could theoretically have contributed towards them maintaining their muscle better throughout their competition prep. Why would that be? Well, mostly it's going to be because it's fueling your training. We will talk about protein, and protein is important for retaining your muscle, but the best thing you can do to retain your muscle is make sure you are still getting stronger, or at least maintaining your strength. And carbohydrates are going to be the thing fueling your glycolytic workouts, aka your weight training workouts, and that's what's going to do the best to keep your muscle. It's also going to help with fat loss for two reasons. Number one is because if I ask you, right, I'm going to have you at calorie maintenance, and then I'm going to put you in a calorie surplus on one day. It's going to be just by carbs, going extra on carbs. Then on another day, I'm going to feed you with just extra fats, the same amount of calories of carbs or fats. Which day are you going to gain more body fat? Because you will gain body fat. You're in a calorie surplus. That's what happens. Most people would think carbs, but it's not. That's not the case. So in this very famous overfeeding study, what they found was carbohydrate overfeeding produced or resulted in 75 to 85% of excess energy being stored as body fat, whereas fat overfeeding led to a storage of 90 to 95%. So what that means is 75 to 85% of the carbs you have in a calorie surplus above your maintenance will be stored as body fat, but 90 to 95% of the fats, or the calories I should say from fats, will be stored as body fat. So more fat will be stored as body fat than carbs, right, on a calorie per calorie basis. Secondly, carbs actually rank higher on the satiety index. So there's this big myth that, fats keep you full. No, they just have heaps of calories in them, which keeps you full. But when you compare which foods actually lead to the greatest feeling of fullness of satiety, it's potatoes, it's oats, and then it's the protein sources too. Carbs are much more filling on a calorie per calorie basis than fats, apart from like sugar, essentially, you know? All right, so you know you need to be having a high carb, moderate to low fat approach, not no fat, and I'll tell you where your fats should be, but let's cover protein. So with protein, the famous science-based recommendation, the Jeff Nippard recommendation, will be 1.6 gram per kg of body weight, and that comes from a really awesome meta-analysis review. All of the big dogs in the science-based world are in on this paper, and that's totally cool. It came from 2018. There's been some extra research since. So this was in 2020, and what they found was a increasing protein intake for several months. So when you increase it periodically over a range of doses from 0.5 gram per kg up to 3.5 gram per kg per day may increase or maintain lean body mass. So 3.5 gram per kg per day, that's a lot higher than 1.6 gram per kg, isn't it? Here's what I recommend. I recommend 3 grams per kg of your lean body mass in your protein per day. So how do you figure that out? I would get ChatGPT to do the math, if I'm being honest with you, but to figure out your lean body mass, you take your total body weight. How much do you weigh? Let's say you weigh 80 kilos. And then what body fat percentage are you? Let's say you're 15 kilos. Sorry, 15% body fat, which is where you're probably at if you're watching this video, 12, 15, so on and so forth. You're going to take that and you're going to figure out that from that, the amount of body fat you have on your body is 12 kilos. 15% of 80 is 12. Yeah, I think I've done my math correctly. So therefore, you're having 3 grams per kg of your lean body mass. So you're going to go 80 minus the 12, because you're 80 kilos, but 12 of that is fat. So then you're going to take that off and have 68. 3 grams per kg of your lean weight, 3 grams, 3 times 68. And that's how much protein you're going to have in that example if you are 80 kilos and 15% body fat. Fats you're going to keep at 0.6 gram per kg of your body weight. You never go below 0.5. That's your minimum for your health, because you do need some fats for absorbing vitamins, for maintaining your hormone function, right? Testosterone is synthesized from fats. And then you make up the entire rest of your calories from carbs. So that's how you're going to keep your carbs as high as you physically possibly can. Cool. So we've covered recovery, we covered sleep, we've covered training, we've covered nutrition, we've covered macros. This is the exact approach I use with Henry, and this is the approach we're going to use to keep getting even leaner. So stick around for another update. Now, if you would like help with your own physique transformation, please hit the first link in the description, and I'll see you in the video next, the day after tomorrow.